graph in the mix would be a monopoly graph. So we go polar ends of the spectrum, right? A monopoly graph is going to be when there's only, obviously, we know one person in the market. So a monopoly. Then we have a downward sloping demand curve. And then that's also our average revenue and our price. And remember, marginal revenue has separated. So marginal revenue is going to be below DARP. And the reason is because to sell one more unit, I have to lower the price on all the previous units. So MR lower than DARP. Why? To sell more units, you have to lower the price on all the ones in front. Okay, all the previous units. So that's a big deal. A lot of times they like to ask that. They also want you to show that your marginal revenue is going to actually go below zero. So they like to see that too. Whoops, let's go right there. Your marginal revenue crossing zero, because that's going to be a point for us, right? Like we know that they like to ask that question because what's really happening underneath? And what's really happening underneath, if you recall, is we do have a total revenue sort of graph happening down here. And my total revenue, if you remember, my total revenue is going to increase up to where my marginal revenue crosses zero. Because if my marginal revenue is positive, my total revenue has to be increasing. So my marginal revenue is positive, my total revenue is increasing. As soon as marginal revenue goes negative, then all of a sudden my total revenue is going to start to come down. So there's a point here to say, yes, that is where my marginal revenue crosses zero, and where that happens, my total revenue is maximized. Okay, so good thing to note there. We have a couple lines missing up here now, so we have to draw those in. We have a marginal cost curve, just like we would before, right? And then if this is a normal looking monopoly, we would have our average total cost coming in, bottoming out, and coming up. So there's my average total cost. And in this case, again, just like before, MC equals MR is going to be our profit maximizing point. So we're going to go to where MC equals MR, come up here, get our price, right? Come down, get our quantity, and then we're going to go from price down here to our ATC. We're going to come across and shade that in. That is our profit right there. Now, remember Q here, this is profit max. So if they ask you, where's the profit maximizing price, you got to go MC equals MR, profit max. But if you go to where total revenue max, you'd go to where MR equals 0. That is total revenue max. Two different places in a monopoly graph. Good to know. What do they like to ask us about monopoly graphs? Well, they like to say, hey, is this thing efficient? And the answer is no. It is not allocatively, it is not, let's do productively efficient. Not productively efficient, because here, if you look where my average total cost is minimized, I am not producing there. So if I come down here, I'm not producing at, let's say that is Q2. Okay, so no ATC min, right? You're not doing that. And then it is also not allocatively efficient, because you can see there's also a deadweight loss. Here's my deadweight loss triangle right there. It's shaded in for you. That deadweight loss triangle here that's what's telling me, hey, I'm having some problems, so I'm not allocatively efficient. You can also tell because if I go from my price up to my marginal cost, that would be the point here at like Q3, let's say. That would be your allocatively efficient point. And you are not there. You're producing less than that here at our profit maximizing point. So in this case, P does not equal MC. That is your stuff on monopoly. Now, what else could they ask you? They could ask you a couple things about maybe elasticity. So just remember where my total revenue is maximized here. if I go straight up from there, right through that MR0, okay, everything on this line means when the price is going down, my total revenue is going up. And if my price is going down and total revenue is coming up, that means I have an elastic looking line up here. Everything from this point down, my price goes down, my total revenue goes down. That means I'm looking at an inelastic looking line. Again, you could tax a monopoly just like you could in a perfect competition one when we just talked about taxes. They could throw a lump sum tax on this thing. It wouldn't really change anything that we're doing. If they did a per unit tax, now you'd start seeing the lines kind of shifting to the left. This whole thing would probably move up a little bit, and that would affect it. So if they ask you a tax question, just kind of treat it like a tax problem. Remember, your supply line, again, is this marginal cost curve. So if I'm taxing it, I got to move everything, and that's going to cause you some issues. But if it's just simply a, hey, do I tax this thing and like as a lump sum, well, nothing really else is going to change. This is your monopoly graph. I cannot think of anything else other that they would actually. Now, granted, they could ask you a zillion questions. They could make it look, again, they could also do it where they draw this, and then they could make your ATC, just straight across like that, which would also be then your, MR down here. That would be your ATC and your MC. They would make both those things together, and then you'd still have to go here, up and over to get our price and our quantity, okay? And then if this was my average total cost, I could come down and this would all be profit. And then they like doing this style for you because that would be profit, especially if you were comparing it to like perfect competition and where they would produce, because they would come out here, right? And you're back there, and then there's your deadweight loss triangle. Sometimes they do it, especially in a comparison. If they're comparing a monopoly to perfect competition, sometimes they straighten this line out. So it would be taking my MC and my ATC coming across horizontal, and then there's my deadweight loss. Here is my profit. But if we were going to say, hey, where would a perfect competitor produce? A perfect competitor would produce right there, because it would be where like my marginal revenue would equal my DARP line now, and I would come out here where MC equals MR. So they could give you one like that instead of like this. Either way, just go to where your lines cross and you should be good. All right, that is a monopoly graph.